Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Overlap Podcast with me, Sid Sexton, and my good friend, Keith Glines. Good afternoon, Keith.
Good afternoon, Sid.
Good afternoon. Yep. Episode 115 of the Overlap Podcast. And if you're new or just coming back to the Overlap Podcast and you forgot what it's all about, the Overlap Podcast, we discuss, study, talk to others about the overlaps in life. That's, family, fitness, parenting, management, business, and how you show up for the workout is how you're going to show up at work. And really, there's no compartmentalization in life. Getting better in one aspect of life, whether that's jujitsu or business planning, as it may be today, helps you become better in all other aspects of life. And it's, it takes some intentionality to see that and to interweave those things. And that's what we're trying to discuss all the time here.
We're trying to get better all the time on the podcast. And I think, though, we probably ruined the podcast today at episode 115 because there's cameras rolling. And we decided it was a good idea to put our faces on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm not sure I decided that, but I'm just going to go along with it.
Well, you look good today.
Yeah, okay. I actually forgot we were doing cameras today, so I've got just a plain T-shirt. So
yeah, I went with the T-shirt, too.
Okay.
It's simple business.
All right. Well, if you are, if you're tuning in today or watching on YouTube for the first time, thank you. And if you're tuning in on the podcast, thanks for that. You won't have to see how old I look. That's a pretty good deal. But today we're gonna discuss a pretty cool workshop is the best way to describe this. I think I was trying to call it a seminar. It wasn't that. It was long hours, lots of work to be done, lots of other things. And it wasn't like a lecture, it was a lot of like interactive work. I got this big booklet. I didn't bring it with me. I forgot we were going to be on YouTube, or I would have brought that. But we're going to discuss a workshop by a guy named Keith Cunningham. If you're familiar with the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this guy is actually Rich Dad. Like, he's who Rich Dad was based off of. Robert Kiyosaki was one of his pupils, if you will. I'm kind of running out of terms, but mentee, I guess. And he mentored Robert Kiyosaki and then he went ahead and started that book Empire. Didn't really reference him, but it's okay. Do a little research, and I kind of found that out. And
That's awesome. I had no idea.
Yeah, he's only mentioned it to me one time, sort of like half-heartedly, Yeah, and he's like, wish I would have got a little bit out of that deal. He only sold 30 million copies.
Yeah, that book changed the foundational way I thought.
It really did. It was one of the first books that I read that was like, oh wow, that's different.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's good. So Keith Cunningham is really he's a business consultant, coach. I don't think he's really a coach. What he does is he would put on boot camps like this planning boot camp. The names are a little hokey. Plan or Get Slaughtered was the name of this one. He had another one called How to Buy or Exit a Business. That was really good. And then he's got some other stuff. Essentially, he runs a board of directors for between 10 and 12 other boards, and with that, and that's really how I got hooked up with him. It's through an MBA deal, and then got onto a board of directors sort of function, and I go and visit him 3 times a year. And in this process, you write a report to the board. He's like the chairman of the board, and really sort of you function as board members of everyone's companies, and you're required to present a presentation and go through how your business was operating between the time of your last meeting and the time of this current meeting. And it does force a lot of like deep thinking about the root problems or the objectives you're trying to achieve, and what are you maximizing for, and then what are the environmental issues that might be holding you back from achieving like bigger goals in the future or between now and the next meeting. So,
man, you sent me this report, and
Yeah.
after reading it, I text you back and I said, if everyone had to think this deep inside of their business, it would be way good. And so,
yeah,
because I don't know that we do that as business owners a lot. How deep do we go? And what I saw from that is Keith Cunningham made you go really super deep.
Super deep. And I will say this, I've only been to 4 meetings so far, and every one has been progressively better, and every one he's picked out 4, 5, 6 things where I was a little vague with the details here or there, and I can't see it. He has to like show me that, like, hey, you say these things, I don't see the numbers saying that. Could you next time actually display that with some sort of graph or some sort of like, display of numbers that sort of back up what you just said? Because you threw some words at me, but I don't have the data to back that up. I need to see that. I'm like, oh man, that's really, really good.
Yeah, because numbers is the language of
business. And I'm saying I got a damn podcast talking about it, and this guy's teaching me. But I really think that sort of, we could talk about specifics of him or that program, but the real deal is that I actively sought out another coach that's going to push me harder and to help me get to another level. And it took me a little while to sort of find someone like that, but I did because I was just open to that. And I think that's kind of at the heart of what we're talking about all the time, that your greatest investment is in yourself, and that investment in yourself should probably be in education. And education doesn't always have to come in the 4-year college or the 2-year master's degree program. It could be through consulting. It could be through seminars. It could be through boot camps or things of that nature. It could be in board of directors or peer groups or just one-on-one coaching. It could be all of it, but only you really know. Only you, the listener, really kind of have an idea of what you need or what you can afford or what you've got the capacity to do at that time, and it can always progress up. I spent, to this point, I spent 17 years in a landscaping peer group, 17 years, until I started having diminishing returns from that investment in time and money, that I started looking for the next step up. Not that group was bad or anything else. I had just gotten to a point where I feel like I needed something different. And I just started looking for it and found it.
And you only knew that because you do assessments of where you're at.
I do that.
And so I think a lot of times people get very complacent about the processes or the procedures or the a peer group that they're in, and they just want to stick in because they're friends. But sometimes you can be friends outside of that and get better help.
Man, for real, 3 guys in that group I feel like I grew up with, and I talked to at least 2 of them weekly basis. One of them we had on the podcast, Chad Warweg, and you heard that guy. Like, man, we love each other. We know each other's kids.
Oh, we picked him for episode 100.
Yeah, we grew up together. Another one is a guy, Clint Allison. He's going to be on here before too long, and I talked to that guy. I talked to him today. I talked to him yesterday. I talked to him last week, and so there's lifelong friends, but I needed to kind of move forward. And you know me, I just I'm probably a little bit. I'm just wired to constantly look for something to get better, maximizing. If you do the strengths finders kind of thing, that number one thing I've got is maximizer.
Yeah, you're the maximizer.
I'm the maximizer. Okay, we've got this. How can I make that a little bit better? So that's what I do, and to that note, I went to the last live event that Keith Cunningham was going to do. One, I'm on this guy's board, and he's talking about it, and he's talking about the need for planning all the time. It's really the core foundation of what he's talking about in those boards is having a plan, spending the quality time of thinking about the plan and noodling out different scenarios. And I thought, man, it'd probably be worthwhile for myself and Forrest, who we've had on the podcast, our integrator, and really is kind of my partner in planning out the next year, maybe the next 3 years, where I can have some of these ideas and then run them by him, and then he can sort of bounce those out and see what we can kind of get executed. So we were in Austin last week, and I thought it would be a good idea to really explain to the audience the breadth and depth of planning that I was exposed to. And I'll just say this, that it was vastly superior to what I thought planning should and could be. I fancied myself a pretty decent planner, and I am a neophyte. How about that for a fancy word, Austin?
Oh, you
like
just
that?
blew that
up. When it comes to planning, I just didn't even get how deep this guy goes. And I'll start with this. And like his opening line in the thing is, he goes, "Hey, how many people?" Their plan, they're going to bring it out to their people. How many people have presented the plan to their team, to their leadership team, whatever, of this? We're going to grow revenue by 22%. I mean, I hear that all the time. And he goes, right about there is when the basic plan stops, and there might be some stuff filled in that it says like, oh, we're going to increase advertising by 30%, and that's going to get filtered into these channels, and then we're going to sell these services at this rate and whatever, right? And all it really is just throwing out like bullet points with no back end plan to how that actually happens, or whether that's actually the right thing that we should be doing. Is growing 22% the right thing to do? And he really pushes that all the time. He pushed that all the time, especially in this workshop, and he does it a lot in the board. That, what are you optimizing for? Is growing 22%, what is that for? What are you trying to achieve with that? And I thought that growing 22% was like self-evident, that, well, to make more money or to whatever, And he goes, no. He's like, he says this, and I know it to be true. He goes, I can come up with a plan to grow your business 50%, but you'll be out of money by the end of the year. Is that what you're optimizing for? He's like, so the plan has to come with both sides of the coin there. These are some of this is my take on it. And I'm like, oh, man, you're kind of kicking me in the chest with this.
Well, if I think about it, I mean, how many times have I gone into a quarterly planning meeting and just threw like numbers at the board?
Yeah, just throwing it at.
With no basis, not looking at anything, just saying, hey, I want to grow 20%.
Yeah.
Because I think that's normal.
And it's a wish is what
right.
it is. And he goes, well, you're wishing for a Corvette or whatever, or a Formula One race car. But if you had your hands on the steering wheel and your foot on the gas pedal and the brake of a Formula One race car, would you actually know how to even get it in first? And if you got it in first, would you be able to get it around the track, or would you just crash that thing? This is, again, some of my notes going, oh, that's really what he's saying. And I'm like, okay. So he talks about this, and this was a good one. So 4 lessons. We're just getting into my notes, and this is really what I wanted to, as we're as we're moving into what I feel like is the planning season of the year, and whether you're listening to this when this podcast comes out in the fall, late fall, early winter, or if you listen to it any other time of the year, I think this is going to be beneficial because I think I have started to learn that, especially using EOS and really being exposed to Keith Cunningham more and more, I'm constantly recalibrating that plan. But right now, I try to set the big plan, right? So he talks about the 4 lessons from The Wizard of Oz, and he goes in, the number 1 watched movie in the history of the world is The Wizard of Oz. I don't know if that's true or not. I'll take his word. Austin's going to look that up for us.
I would think that's probably right because it's old.
Okay. There we go.
And everybody's going to introduce their kids to The Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then you got those weirdos that put it on mute and listen to Dark Side of the Moon as it plays.
Oh, yeah.
Right from the roar of the lion during the MGM thing. Austin, were you aware of that one? No? Okay, that might have been the kids from the 90s. Sorry. So the 4 lessons from The Wizard of Oz. Number 1, a description of the outcome or destination is no substitute for a roadmap for us to get there. He talks about the yellow brick road. They all know they got to get on the yellow brick road to make it to Oz. That's way more important than we just want to go to Oz. They wouldn't know how to get there if they didn't have a yellow brick road, right? And he goes in to talk about that, and I'm like, ooh, that's good. And that's really what he's talking about in the planning. We want to get to 22% growth.
When you call that the yellow brick road,
the yellow brick road
is planning.
Is the plan.
Yeah, got it.
Oz, you can announce that we're going to go to Oz.
Right.
But that won't matter unless you've got the yellow brick road. It's way more important. Now, he also says roadmaps or the yellow brick road ignore the environment. Roadmaps that ignore the environment are worthless. So if you got a roadmap or a yellow brick road that doesn't take into account that it's going right through the middle of a lake, and you're going to have to swim across a lake, and you don't know how to swim, or you can't swim that far, or something, well, that's worthless. If it goes up over a mountain and you're not able to get up over that mountain, that's worthless too, So roadmaps that ignore the environment are worthless, or yellow brick roads.
We were just talking about that in our planning meeting, our L10, when you were saying, hey, I was going through this situation, and I called all my buddies from around the country, they're going through the same thing too. So ignoring
environmental impact.
Environmental impact is absolute, because if it is affecting you, it's probably affecting somebody else too.
Well, and I was really going to get into that. I think that's the number one thing. That's probably the number one message that I want to leave the audience with. So the environment that you are planning in is almost, considering that is almost more important than anything else, because that's going to dictate what you need. And then how you're going to get there is the fourth thing. And he talks about what kind of machine do you have? Do you have a machine or do you have a crank? So a machine is something automated that generates income. It's pretty smooth. It's running really well. A crank is you getting out there and hand cranking it. So if you're a solopreneur and you're in the service industry, you got to factor that in, because you're the guy or girl having to go and do everything. So let's take that into consideration when we're building our plan. Can you actually grow 122% if you're the person to do that? Maybe what you have to do is to start building a machine if you want to do that. And machine can mean a lot of different things. Like maybe you got to get an executive assistant to handle some other stuff. Maybe, virtual assistant. That's what I meant to say. Maybe you've got to hire someone. Maybe whatever. Maybe you got to try a different service. I don't know.
I've been geeking out on Dan Sullivan too.
Yeah, you have.
And what he says is that if you are the only one creating momentum in your company, it's very hard to grow exponentially.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So if you are that solopreneur and you have plans for exponential growth, look at bringing others on the team to create the momentum.
And so I think there's there's dichotomies and overlaps in both of that between environmental issues and what sort of machine or crank you have. And hey, we're just jumping right into this, audience. We're talking about planning. Consider, are you the only person? And if you're the only person, you're limited by how much work you can honestly do. Let's be honest about it. Will the environment respond to you and your desire for 122% growth or whatever? I'm just throwing that out there. Can you hire someone? How can you do some things? And that's where the planning starts. Is figuring out where you're at, where you're trying to go, and what are the obstacles in the way.
And are you doing, if you want to stay a solopreneur, I don't know why anyone would, but maybe you do.
Maybe there's a service that they're providing.
Are you doing the quality work that you need to be doing, or are you delving into things that you shouldn't be?
Yeah.
And so exponential growth comes there also.
Yeah. One of the things he really talks about, and this is probably the second biggest point I got, was don't ignore the chronic problems that are inherent in your business. And chronic problems are the ones that are keeping you from reaching your goals all the time. So if you're setting goals this year, you probably set goals last year. And if you set goals last year, you might have set goals the year before that. If you did that and you didn't reach your goals, it's easy to write those things off and ignore. It is easy to either write the misses off or to explain those away about certain symptoms. Like, and I'm kind of winging it here, but let's say you tried for 22% growth. You had a good plan. That's all right. You had a good plan, and you just missed. But you really know that it was this crew right there was pretty unproductive, and they turned in some pretty bad work. So you didn't get the referral work that should have been off of those jobs right there. And, by the end of the year, you had let them go, and you could just say, that was it. That was them, and no more of that problem. We're not going to have that again this year. Is that the core problem?
No.
It's not if you dig deep enough. Someone hired them. Someone trained them and onboard them. Someone set the expectations or the standards that were supposed to be withheld that didn't get met. Someone's supposed to hold them accountable to that. Someone's supposed to coach them up to that if they miss it and make sure they don't leave the job without meeting that standard. There's all kinds of layers behind that. And so that's where your plan should really start. What are the chronic problems? These are things that have been around a while, and you just haven't addressed them. And there's all kinds of those things everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere in our business, in all of our businesses.
No one wants to point out the chronic problems because it may be you.
Dude, it always is you.
Yeah,
it's
every time.
You're stealing my thunder a little bit there. I was gonna say, in every point of the plan starts in the mirror. Who are you and why are you holding your company back? That's for you, listener. Who are you and why are you holding your company back? How are you holding your company back? How are you holding yourself back? You started last year with, I'm going to lose 25 pounds and get in, great shape. And by March, you were way off of that plan. And by June, you were mad at yourself that you were out at the beach and you didn't look the way you wanted to. All those things. What's holding you back? What's keeping you from doing that? Did you not commit to, hiring a personal trainer because you didn't want to spend the $300 a month? Whatever. I'm just, I'm kind of throwing things out.
That's what I was thinking too. Was your plan or your goals even smart?
Yeah.
Could it be achieved?
Could it be achieved? Really, it comes down to this. 2 life questions, and Keith talks about this. 2 life questions. What do I want? And what am I willing to do to get it? What do I want and what am I willing to do to get it? Now, I want to lose 25 pounds and I want to get in great shape. What am I willing to do to get it? If that's very little, let's be honest about that. So maybe I can't lose 25 pounds in 12 months. Maybe it's 18. Maybe you know what I'm saying? Like maybe you extend that out. Maybe you need to set up, that you've struggled with this for years. So maybe you got to set yourself up to get some little wins, to get some momentum.
In my goal setting or my planning, I always have the tendency to overshoot my ability.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
And I call it being positive.
Yeah. Overly optimistic.
Right.
And that's me. All of my big mistakes have really stemmed from me being overly optimistic and real just generalization of the facts,
Right.
I'm just glossing over all kinds of stuff. I'm glossing over some of the details that may or may not need to be true for me to get to where I'm trying to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's me also.
So,
but it's also what makes entrepreneurs and visionaries beautiful too.
It's good. Which is good until it gets you in trouble. There's a shadow side of every coin. So the shiny side is, we can come up with ideas. We can envision lives or companies that are better than what they are right now. We can envision what is possible in the future before it actually happens. We can usually inspire others and gather teams to sort of work towards one goal. We just get a little fuzzy with the facts, and those are the ones that get us in trouble. But the other side is I usually get right back up and keep going instead of feeling let down and like, oh, I better quit. I don't do that. I've been knocked down a bunch.
Or we ignore the facts.
I
will do that.
Ignore.
I will do if the fact is staring me in the face and I don't want to listen to it, I'll totally blow over.
Well, and it's easier for it to be someone else's fault.
Yes,
or something else's fault.
Yep.
Okay. So about planning, you need to create a plan that deals with stuff that derails our plans year after year. The primary here is critical. Austin, listen up. I'm talking to Austin over here, our producer, so the audience gets a better feel for me talking to someone other than Keith. But the primary purpose of every plan in a business is to protect and or enhance our enterprise value. That's fancy. So Keith Cunningham swears by this, that the primary purpose of a plan is to protect or enhance the enterprise value of the business. Your question might be, what the hell does that mean, enterprise value? Enterprise value is in just real quick terms, you've heard of the term EBITDA? That's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. If you're going to grow a business of any business, pressure washing business, landscape business, social media business, freaking a lawyer's office, a doctor's office, any of that, the valuation of that business is going to be based off of EBITDA or EBITDA. I've heard it pronounced a bunch of different ways. And then that EBITDA is your value, kind of, but the enterprise value is the multiple in that space. So every space has a different type of multiple, what the market will generally pay for it. So if you're in the landscaping business, and you've got an EBITDA of $500,000, you can kind of guess that your multiple somewhere between 5 and 7, meaning you can get 5x of that EBITDA. So your enterprise value at 5 is $2.5 million. Is that right?
Yeah,
$2.5 million. I was like, man, that sounded right. So your enterprise value, you tracking? So the enterprise value is $2.5 million. Could be more than that. Could be 3.5. But let's just stick with 2.5. So whatever plan you come up with needs to protect. We can't go below 2.5. But our plan needs to possibly help us grow it to 3. Can we grow it another 500,000, that enterprise value, with whatever moves we make this year? Now, that's going to be what are the environmental factors, and then what do we need to do to make that happen? That's the lens you should be looking your plan through. You ever heard that stuff? No, they don't talk about that very much. This is real heavy stuff. Okay. That's the second thing. The third thing, planning requires clarity on critical drivers. Critical drivers, let me just, so you'll come up with whatever the strategic outcome is, which is to, whatever your plan is devised to do, which is going to protect or enhance your enterprise value. Those are the moves that we're going to make. Those are the outcomes, and those outcomes should produce the protection or the enhancement of that value. The critical drivers are the activities we have to do to make that happen, and that's where I think we get fuzzy. Does that make sense? You tracking me there?
Yeah, we get fuzzy, or we don't even know.
We don't even mention it. We're like, we're going to throw some money at marketing. Well, how much? Where at? Where's it going to go? How often? What's the frequency? What's the target audience? We might even get to there, but is that consistent throughout? How many leads should that produce? Are we tracking that on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? With those leads, how are we converting them into sales? What's the closing ratio on those sales? If we're going to produce 20 leads a week and we close 50% on that, we should have 10 sales per week, right? Well, let's just track 20 leads, 10 sales. Should we track in that math that we need to get there? Does our average job size need to be a certain size? Because if the average job size in our math is $500 a job, but it starts to drop to be $350, well, we'll have to adjust that to get more leads because our job size is smaller to get to the ultimate goal, which is to enhance or protect that enterprise value. But those are the things that should be in the plan, tracking those activities and the possibilities of what can go right or what can go wrong, and then some potential changes or moves within that. And that might change seasonally too. In the spring, it might go quicker. In the summer, we'll have to do some different things. Fall, we'll have to change that strategy to this, but we need to be doing that before it gets there and be proactive instead of reactive, because you got a proactive plan. With me? Okay. Last thing, how do we get clarity about those critical drivers? That's where you really get down to it, the clarity. And usually this comes to the book that you and I have been talking about. It comes down to who, not how. Yep. Who's going to be responsible for what? And if you're running EOS and you're running 90, it makes all of this work so much easier. I know that Keith's going to be responsible for these numbers every week. I know Austin's going to be responsible for these 3 numbers every week. I'm going to be responsible for these 4 numbers, and then Forrest is going to be responsible for those. And if everyone just does their job, this plan should work out. And if the numbers start coming in a little different, we're going to catch that quick enough to make adjustments to keep going towards the right direction. Does that make sense? This is pretty deep.
It is.
Now, you may be listening and say, oh, that all sounds easy.
And what I'm asking myself right now is, do I even have plans? Are the plans that I'm making even around the metrics that I'm tracking?
Oh, what does your scorecard look like?
Yeah, what does your scorecard look like? Because how many times do you track stuff or want growth somewhere and you're not even tracking to be able to create smart plans?
Yeah. Well, let's go into this just a little bit too. So, I think in this work planning workshop really drove it home for me. Everyone on your team should be responsible for at least one number. That gives them real direction on what their job is for. Because I do think that some people get it confused sometimes that, and I don't mean this derogatory in any way, and this sounds, I wish there was a better way for me to say this to not sound harsh, but everyone thinks that that's their job. It's not their job. It's a job that they are fulfilling for the company to produce X. Does that make sense?
Right.
That whole role that you're getting paid $20 an hour or $50 an hour or $100,000 a year is to produce X. What is that X? And you should know that, and we should be tracking it so you know if you're winning or losing. if you produce X, that should be in the plan for us to protect or enhance the enterprise value of the company. If it doesn't do that, well, that doesn't help the company. So we got to change your metric that you're going after, or maybe we got the wrong role in the company now. Maybe it's morphed into something different and we don't need that anymore. But who, not how, starts to give you clarity about what the critical drivers are. And everyone needs to be responsible for an outcome. Sometimes it's 3 outcomes. Sometimes it's 5. I wouldn't recommend more than 5 because you start to get like, a little bit confused. And if everything's important, nothing's important. But what are the 5, 4, 3 dominoes that are going to move everything in the right direction in your role, Keith? And let's talk about that before we get started for the year. They're going to be these 4 things, and we're going to be tracking those on a weekly basis on this scorecard. And really what we're tracking is the activity that should produce this outcome. The lead measures that get us the lag measure. I need 20 leads this week. Austin's going to produce 20 leads. I need you to close. I need you to run 20 leads, and I need you to sell 10 of those. That's closing 50%. We agree that that's a good closing rate, and I need that average job size to be 500. If not, we're going to have to make some adjustments there too. We'll see how the environment reacts to our marketing and whatever, but that's what I need you to do. Are you good with that? And you, yes or no, are you on the plan? Are you on the team to execute the plan or not? That kind of thing. And if you think about it, football players, they know what their role is. Slot receiver, they're trying to get X. They're trying to run their route. Running backs are trying to hit the hole, and the lag is they got this many catches, they got this many yards. But the role is to run this route as good as possible and hit this space or whatever, pick up that block or whatever. Everyone knows what their job is. And they always boil it down to like 3, 4, 5 things.
And that's the ticket, is knowing your role.
Know your role.
I don't know that most people, one, entrepreneurs, know their role.
Yeah.
2, know the people that they hire, what their role should be.
Yeah. So that gets me to, oh man, where is it? The 5 things that cannot be delegated by a CEO. So the 5 things that can't be delegated by a CEO is, number 1, the outcome. Where are we trying to get? What is Oz? Are we trying to grow by 22%? I can't outsource that to anyone else. I can't say, hey, Austin, would you mind coming up with like where our plan is for 2024? I can't do that. I got to take the data. I got to figure out what the environment might give us. I got to figure out who's on my team. I got to figure out what my enterprise value is and how that gets affected by whatever, like if we buy a bunch of equipment, does that eat up our free cash flow? Does that affect us from not being able to sort of execute some other portion of the plan? Or does that, elevate our depreciation, which might increase value, but that might be short term too. Either way, I can't outsource that. I got to come up with that. That's my job. I signed up for that. That's what I decided to do when I started a business. So I better get decent at that. And if you're a visionary, you kind of like that stuff anyways. Number 2, what is the obstacle? What is the thing? What's the chronic problem that we keep avoiding and we haven't really addressed? But what's the problem that's going to keep us from getting to the outcome? I can't outsource that. And I have tried to outsource that too many times. I've tried to say, hey guys, what do y'all think the problem is, and blah, blah, blah. Now I can gather some information, but someone's got to make a call and say, this is the problem we've been having. This is the issue. This is what we're going to address with our plan this year. Because it's not that crew that did a bad job. It's our hiring process. And our hiring process leads to our onboarding process. Our onboarding process is really affecting the training, and the training is affecting the work, and these measurables on a weekly basis that those guys didn't know of. We're going to start doing that so they know if they're winning or losing, so their supervisor can then coach them on where they're not winning or where they need to improve, and then encourage them where they are winning, and then get the most performance out of them.
Anytime I leave the obstacle to my team, it's not the real obstacle.
It's not the real obstacle
because they can't see the whole picture typically.
Well, and yeah, no kidding. Well, that's not their job.
And nor they should. Nor should they, right? They don't know the whole picture. They don't know where I want to go. I mean, they know some of the small steps to where I want to go, but they don't know the whole picture.
Yeah.
So to ask your team to pick the obstacle, it's probably wrong.
Probably wrong. Well, even if it's not wrong, it's your job as the CEO or the leader to decide what the obstacle is going to be. And if you outsource that and it is wrong, you can't blame anyone else. It's your job. That's your role. That's it right there. Number 3, the prioritization of resources. So you can't outsource what we're going to spend, what we're going to use, who's doing what. Resources, are people, equipment, money, whatever leverage you have within your organization. I don't know what that is, but you can't really outsource that. You can, you probably shouldn't. You should set the stage for how the resources are going to be used in your plan. Make sense?
Yeah, the Bible says this is a biblical principle too. The Bible says know the condition of your flocks, and I think that's a big deal. In how many times have I extended resources and not understanding how much I had?
Okay, there you go.
I mean, when it comes to equipment or the capabilities, or
here's what I know happens in the landscape world all the time, because. Look, man, I'm not dogging Dave Ramsey out, but I just have a different opinion on cash flow when it comes to running a business. And Dave was never going to listen to this, and I'm not big enough for him to actually send me an email.
Well, and he's a billionaire now, so.
Well, yeah. But he started a company on a card table in his living room that didn't actually have anything.
Correct.
There's no mowers, there's no skid steers, there's no trucks when it comes to an insurance company. They're selling paper. And that gets underwritten by someone behind them, So they're just a sales organization going to sell you insurance, but I'm just the middleman between you and the people that are actually writing the insurance behind me, but I've got an insurance company. Does that make sense?
No, totally. So, and I see it in the differences between mine and your business. It's very easy for me to run zero-based budget. Because I can do that.
Yeah.
Looking at what you have to oversee and the equipment that you have to extend yourself for, there's no way I could do it.
And so what happens, is you'll get a guy that wants to be debt-free, had a pretty good year, has got $300,000 in cash, and he's never had that before in his life, and he wants to buy an excavator that's $180,000, and he goes, well, yeah, I should buy that with cash. Then it takes him another $100,000 to make it through the winter. You doing the math on this? The dude's got $20,000 in cash left, and he's got to start the season up. He doesn't have enough cash to make it through the startup, where you hire everyone back, you go through a little training, you're paying these people. There's probably some new uniforms. Maybe you repaint the office or something like that. There's all kinds of things. You got to crank up the marketing machine again, and they're going to need money. There's just tons of stuff going on there. So I can't outsource the prioritization of resources, because I got to be real thoughtful about that. What's the environment? What do I have to do? What am I maximizing for? What am I optimizing for? Am I trying to make it through winter, or am I trying to get, out of debt with a new piece of equipment? I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's way different.
But when it comes time to borrowing money, after our episode with Mason.
Oh, my gosh.
And this is counterintuitive, or it seems counterintuitive, but the only people that are lendable is people with money.
Yeah. The bank will always loan you money if you have money.
Right.
That has been my mantra for a while. Well, ever since I went broke and I couldn't go to the bank.
Right.
So that's number 3, prioritization of resource. Number 4 is who is on the team. What players do I have and what are their abilities? If I've got a really good quarterback and a bad offensive line, I've got to come up with a different game plan. If I've got a bad quarterback and a really good offensive line but a good running back, I've got to come up with a different game plan. Does that make sense?
Yep.
If I've got a mediocre quarterback and some really talented wide receivers and a mediocre offensive line, I got to come up with a different plan. If I've got a really good offense and a bad defense, I've got to come up with a different plan, and vice versa. All of these things, who's on the team? You really have to be thoughtful about who's on the team, and I can't outsource who's on the team and where are they going on the team. Who's playing on that? Who's playing first base? Who's pitching? Who's on second? Who's in center field? Who's catching? All of that stuff. I can't really outsource that.
If you are going to outsource it, you better damn well have a great process of hiring.
You got to have a process for hiring. You got to have an outcome that they're responsible for. So this all ties together, right?
Right.
And then the last thing, number 5, is the culture. I cannot outsource what the culture is. If I do that, I'm always going to get something that I don't want, because culture is like water. It goes the path of least resistance, and good culture is going to take effort and intentionality and repetition and accountability and lots of effort. If you're going to create a culture, it has to start from the top. It's got to be real intentional by the CEO, and you've got to set what that's going to be. Does that make sense?
I tell the story all the time of not paying attention to culture, and a couple years ago I didn't even like where I worked.
Oh, yeah.
It's my deal.
Yeah.
But I would go in and I don't even like this. I don't even want this. Is nothing like I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
But it was because I took my eye off the culture and I let other people dictate it.
Right.
I let clients dictate it. I let team members dictate it. I let everyone other than me decide what the culture of my business would be.
Yeah. So those are some of my main notes from this planning. It's called Plan or Get Slaughtered. Keith Cunningham is not doing any of these in a live event anymore, but he does. We'll put a link in the show notes where you could sign up to do this virtually. And he's got a pretty good self-paced, kind of deal with a workbook, and it'll walk you through it. But it's just really in depth.
I don't know, and I think we need to go over this because they're very good. Did we go over the 3 questions we need to continually ask ourselves?
Yeah, I was going to say. So, but I also wanted to, before I get there, is we all know that planning's important, especially if you're listening to a podcast like this. You've been exposed a little bit that there's more depth to it. But let's talk about the value of a plan. What's it really valuable for? So the value of the plan sort of dictates and thinks about, but is intentional about the interdependence of activities. That's a fancy way of saying, how do all these other things you've got going on within your organization interact with the others to produce the result that you want? And I sort of went through that with, Austin's got to produce 20 leads, you got to produce 10 sales, or you got to run 20 leads and sell at 50% closing rate. And then that's got to be at, a certain average job size, to produce the result we're looking for. There's just interdependence of activities, marketing, sales. Someone's got to produce that work and make it valuable enough, all that stuff. Then you've got to get clarity. Then the second thing is a plan gives you clarity of priorities. What is the mission? Resources. What are we willing to pay for it? Who's responsible for what? And then critical drivers, which are the activities. And we keep talking about critical drivers. And then the last thing a plan is super valuable for is a tool for optics and comparison. If you come up with a plan and if you do it well, you can compare where you are with the plan to where you are today. In 1st of November, the plan for 2023, we are off by 7% for sales, 10% off of gross profit. So I know I've got a little bit of slip there, and you can start digging in and seeing what the issues are if you've got a tool for optics in comparison.
The perfect tool is EOS.
A really, really good tool is EOS. There might be others out there.
I don't know a better one, and I've done some pretty extensive.
Yeah, I've
looked for everything.
I'm reluctant to say it's the best, but it's the best that I know of. It's the best that I know of.
And there's nothing that illuminate optics in comparison more than the tools they have within inside that.
Yeah, if you're running 90 for sure.
Right.
I'm a big fan of 90, and if you're running on EOS and using the very inexpensive software called 90, you will have a scorecard for everything we're talking about here, and that will give you optics, and it'll say the goal is the comparison portion. What was the goal? And then what did you achieve this week or this month or this quarter,
Hey, and plug for 90, if you want a little small discount, you can go to overlatlife.com.
Oh, man, there you go.
Click on the EOS tab.
Well done.
It'll send you into 90, and you can sign up.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for that. Thank you for 90 for hooking us up with that too. And it's definitely something I think our listeners should get more serious about. If you're interested, just DM us. We can direct you towards getting set up on EOS. Back to your point, though, and I'm trying to wrap this up because I don't want to talk everyone's ear off about planning, but you mentioned it, 3 questions we need to continually ask ourselves. And this is really important for the overly optimistic entrepreneur, me. I'm talking to myself. The number 1 question is, what am I missing? How many times do we come up with a fuzzy plan that sounds great and it's really inspiring, but what am I missing? So it's good to get your plan to some other set of eyes to really poke holes through that, because you're making some pretty big assumptions. What am I missing? Are you missing the fact that there's going to be an election next year? I don't know if any of you have thought about this. There's going to be an election. I promise you, one side's going to say the world is coming to an end. The other side is going to say, no, we've got everything under control. Don't you see how great things are going? And they ain't going great. And so that starts to make everything seem that undermines public confidence, and people aren't spending when they're not confident, right? So think about, what am I missing? That could be one. Number 2, where am I wrong? What stories and assumptions have I made? I just said that thing that we're going to be able to produce 20 leads. What data do I have that says that that's possible even? Have I ever done that before? If I did do that, what did I do? Can I repeat that? Again, does that tie into what the economy is looking like right now? What am I missing? Where am I wrong? And what do I need to learn? What do I need to learn? That's the number 3. So really, for me, that sort of goes back to maybe that crew that didn't do well, and it gets to, I need to learn to be a better hirer. Do I need to ask better questions? Do I need to be better at onboarding? Do I need to be better at being thoughtful about training? Do I need to be more thoughtful about the metric that crew is being held accountable to, the standard that it is?
This is the question I've been asking a lot.
Okay.
That goes along with that is, did we stick to the process?
Yeah, sure.
Because a lot of times I think we create great processes and then this ideal process, and then we don't stick to it.
Yeah.
And we veer from it because of environmental impact or
get distracted.
Get distracted or new team members. But did we stick to the process?
Yeah.
I've been driving my people crazy with
I agree with that, man. I agree with that. Do you have processes?
Do you have
You know?
processes? Yes.
Yeah. So we've been reviewing our processes and finding we don't have some, and we've got some that are outdated, and some we're just not following. So yeah, I'm with you on the process. Talk about EOS. That's right up EOS.
And then I
alley.
think, what do I need to learn if entrepreneurs are not asking themselves that every day? They're going backwards.
Yeah. Well, and really, if I really am honest with myself and this audience, that I ultimately have the business that I have because of whatever I chose to design or whatever I chose to tolerate. That's it. I have...
Man, the overlaps in life, the
have
overlaps are everywhere.
I have the life that I have because of the decisions I made to design my life in a certain way, or whatever I've decided to tolerate. That gives me exactly what I have. And so if I don't change the way I think, the way I look at things, the way I interact, or whatever, then I'm going to continue to get what I've got. Because if nothing changes, right? And so what do I have to learn is probably the most important question when I'm thinking about a plan and I'm trying to grow 20%, but I've never been able to grow 20%. And why have I not been able to grow 20%? Because people are holding back on production. And why are people holding back on production? Because we're not hiring great people. Why are we not hiring great people? Well, I got to learn how to be a better hirer, better onboarder. I got to be better at whatever, And that's a real surface example. But if you're listening to this and you're being thoughtful in any way, you're thinking about what's holding you back, and you've got to address that in your plan. If you finally address that in this plan, maybe you can start having greater results than you ever thought. But let me start to close this podcast this way. So, and Keith mentions stuff like this all the time. He goes, just imagine you're driving your car. And that's your business, that's your life, whatever. You're driving the car and you're driving down the street in the neighborhood and you're going 50 miles an hour. All of a sudden you see a ball bounce in the road. That doesn't mean that there's a kid right behind it or a dog. But it's pretty likely that there's one there. So you better tap the brakes and look around. And right now I feel like there's a lot of balls rolling in the street. Can you feel it? Can you feel it, Keith?
I got it.
I mean,
feel it.
I mean, like right now, the economy.
Oh yeah.
If you guys
do you feel the
I'm
fear?
I'm not feeling fear. I'm just looking at it in a pragmatic way. Going, if I think that I'm going to grow my business in 2024 by 20%, that seems silly to me. But maybe you're in an industry that you can actually do that. I just don't think so. I'm probably focusing on protecting that enterprise value, not enhancing it this year. What do I got to do to make sure that I limit my losses and I don't get out over my skis? I don't take out a big note to buy a bunch of equipment to optimize for growth when the economy's not going to help me with that, because everyone's pretty fearful about friggin' World War III possibly going down in the Middle East. What the hell's going on over there in Ukraine? Hey, we've got a president that no one really has any confidence in. We've got another guy that's leading the other race that's on trial today, Like, and somehow this guy still leads the race, and I'm not even getting into politics. I'm just going, if that doesn't make everyone nervous, I don't know what else would, So I'm going, how am I going to protect? And I'm being very realistic with my outlooks and my planning to go, what do I got to do to just protect, to play defense, because I don't want to get out over my skis and put myself and the business in trouble,
Right.
because that's my job. I got people that decided to leave whatever job they had and come on board with me, and I got to do my best to make sure that we ride this storm out, you know? And so that's really what I'm thinking about when it comes to planning, you know? I'm thinking about the environment, you know, I'm really thinking about who do we have on the team, I'm thinking about our processes, I'm thinking about where do we have some leverage? Where can we grow? Where is the low-hanging fruit? But then also, where's it really going well? But I need to watch it, you know. And so, you know, those are my thoughts on planning from Plan or Get Slaughtered.
That's good stuff.
What questions you got?
I think that was super thorough.
Well,
your notes were impeccable.
I got a lot more, but I didn't want to, you know, 3 major priorities are structure, leverage, and optics, you know. And then right here we're talking about, you know, he talks about being out of position, and what does out of position look like? And out of position is really you spend a bunch of money to optimize for growth, and the economy doesn't, like, who thought that COVID was going to happen? No one thought that, right? But lots of people that I know were really optimizing for growth and had very little cash to get them through the COVID thing, and then they were in certain industries where business didn't really come back for a long time. So they're out. They're out of the game.
I saw a number
bankrupt.
Like 70% of restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
In COVID.
Yeah.
Out
of the game. Now, did they take a big check and just go ahead and retire? I don't know what that looks like. But a lot of people are out, you know, because they were out of position. And so, out of position, how do you know? What does it look like? And how do you solve that? And there was a lot of time spent on this sensitivity analysis. And a sensitivity analysis is how much money, how much time, and how much money do I have? What's in reserve? Dry powder. How much time do I have with that dry powder? And then single points of failure. Where can I go out? So those are my thoughts, man. I could keep going on for this for hours, but hopefully you got some value out of this, listener. Hopefully you've got some time carved out this quarter to come up with a plan for 2024, and hopefully you're going to take some environmental factors into consideration and what those chronic issues are, problems that were holding you back from reaching your goals years before. Anything you want to sort of chime in on or reiterate? Some high points?
I really think that we've hit this really good.
Okay. Well, I don't want to be redundant. I probably already have. But listeners, thank you so much. We really wouldn't have a podcast if it wasn't for you. And then the next level beyond that is our sponsors. And we actually couldn't do any of this without, we couldn't keep bringing content to you if it wasn't for our sponsors. So please give them a shout out. Go see them. Utilize their services. We absolutely recommend each one of them. We know them personally, and we use their products and their services. Please support them because they support us.
And go sign up for our newsletter. We just started a weekly newsletter where we ask entrepreneurs 5 questions.
There we go.
And so if you want to see what people are thinking about and talking about and the struggles they have, sign up for our newsletter.
Yep. All right. Well, that's all I got. I'm out.
Peace.